welcome back to Frankly Speaking. Once again, the Catholic Roundtable Edition. Joining me here is, well, my good friend Anthony from Texas, my good friend Connor from Indiana, yours truly from Utah. Tonight, we got a wide variety of topics. We're going to talk about Pope Francis's rebuke of Israel, which is interesting. But first, we want to go to Connor here, who's out in Michigan at the Shrine of the Little Flower, where Father Coughlin, has a museum down there, Connor? He's got he built a shrine down there. What you doing out there, buddy?
Yeah, Frank. Really interesting stuff. Father Coughlin, he built up the shrine and started his radio network really in response to the Ku Klux Klan actually burning a cross in front of the church there in the shrine when it was under development. So that's what inspired him to launch his radio program. Uh, Very successful. At one time, it's estimated that 1/3 of all Americans were listening to Father Coughlin. So the shrine was really nice, very holy place. You can see the church that he had constructed there in the shrine. It's in an Art Deco um, architectural build. Lots of relics, and there's a kind of a history on Eucharistic miracles. Just really cool stuff. I got to see some of the personal effects used by Father Coughlin in Holy Mass, his chalice, and some other things. Just a really neat site. I highly recommend it to all Catholics that have the chance.
All right, fantastic. Okay, well, all right, guys. Then let's do this. Then, since we're talking about the Catholic Church or Catholics here, Father Coughlin here, let's move on to the Pope here real quick. And the Pope recently came out and he critiqued Israel once again really hard, calling on the international community to kind of do something about what's going on in Gaza right now. Now, guys, I find this Israel conversation very interesting because it's not a traditional left or right divide. It's really a divide between those that accept the heresy of dispensationalism and those that don't accept the heresy of dispensationalism, which was a heresy concocted in the 19th century. Now, for us Catholics, we don't accept dispensationalism. We believe that's heretical. We kind of have our questions about the formation of Israel to begin with. Obviously, we don't endorse any of the crimes that organizations like Hamas may have committed, obviously, but still, it's a long, confusing history for most people that is now culminated in what looks like an all-out war campaign against the Gazans and the Palestinians over there, which includes not just Muslims, but many Orthodox and many Catholics. Anthony, I'm going to go to you, buddy. I mean, you've talked to me a lot about this. You've had a lot of concerns here. Again, this apparently, again, the right would tell us we're lining up with the radical leftists on this one, but I just don't think it's a left and right issue.
Well, yeah, let's address that first. It's not a left and right issue. Um, I don't care what the radical left believes at any particular time, to be honest. It might be an opportunity to at least try and evangelize them. But for anybody to kind of lump us in with uh, radical Islam or Hamas or radical leftists, uh, they're completely misunderstanding. And I would say a lot of those people are purposely, um, it's not a misunderstanding. They're purposely making us out to be unpatriotic, bad Americans, right? Terrible, terrible Americans. But, we have to be Catholic first and foremost. And so we've had a number of bishops and the Pope himself condemn this action. They haven't really talked about it in terms of being an unjust war, but this doesn't even look like a war, Frank. To be honest, this looks like a genocide. And I do want to talk more about that in a little bit, but I also would like to hear Connor's thoughts on that. I don't want to go on a long diatribe here.
Connor, buddy,
No,
what are your thoughts?
my thoughts on the issue similar. to Anthony's. I do believe it's a genocide. There's numerous comments from both Republican congressmen and Netanyahu and others in Israel that suggest that. Um, what a lot of people don't realize is this whole we have to either pick Hamas or we have to pick Israel. This dichotomy, it's a false dichotomy. You don't have to support Hamas or the state of Israel. As a Catholic, I support my fellow Christians there and all the innocents.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to see bloodshed, especially for a state that was founded and paid for by Rothschilds and other how do you say this? Other suspicious characters.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Anthony, one of the arguments I've heard that goes against your narrative is that if Hamas was holding one or all of your children, I would do I would do whatever we have to do to get your children out of there, Anthony. And they still are holding about 50 hostages. Don't we got to do whatever we can to get those hostages out?
Well, let's talk about this in terms of reality. That's a media spin job on the part of both the United States and Israel. Um, let's go through the facts here, okay? I mean, first of all, the definition of genocide is when there's acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a particular ethnic group or a racial group or a religious group. Okay, well, we can check off two of those at least. Now, the key word there for genocide in a court of law would be intent. And so you have to decide if that was the intent, right? And this does tie into your question. I'll answer it. I'm not trying to get around it, but this is the point, right? So, like, let's think about this. The scale of civilian casualties, you've got over 41,000 killed since October 7th, 2023. You've had uh, civilian infrastructure targeted. There's been repeated bombings of hospitals, schools that were being used as shelters, and
Is
let's not forget our churches themselves. Go ahead, Connor.
Yeah, no, I mean they're bombing churches as well, Anthony. Our Catholic and our Catholic brethren, they're bombing them. Meanwhile, you're having evangelicals here in America cheer them on. They seem more in common with the secular state of Israel than fellow Christians. So much for the body of Christ. Uh,
Exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
What?
and
Yeah, go ahead, Connor.
oh, I was just going to add, Frank, to interject. We all study history. In your studies of World War II, Frank, and other wars, have you ever heard of a war where one of the armies takes photos of themselves in women's lingerie and underwear after they massacre the inhabitants? A people that as a Catholic, I feel bad for even saying this, but you know, pleasuring themselves in a sinful way, uh, taking a picture of that to a burned and bombed out city. I mean, this is just sick stuff. Not to mention horrible sodomite actions against enemy combatants.
Yeah.
I just put that out there because I've never read or seen that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever I've challenged one of sort of the classical liberal pro-conservative sides that supports the Israeli side, they've always come back to me and said, well, you're just falling for propaganda. You're falling for the media propaganda, what's going on over there. And I'm like, well, wait a minute now. One of the first things that I noticed was a letter written by one of the Catholic bishops out in Palestine saying, listen, this is happening here. So it's not
Yes.
just the media. We have Catholics there that are reporting back to Rome, and there's
Yes.
messages out over there. So when I'm told I'm being fooled by a certain type of propaganda, I feel that's a spin to try and throw us off. But it doesn't work for Catholics because we have people on the ground. We have our own brethren on the ground, Anthony.
Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. And You've got, this is the big one, Frank. You've got 90% of the population displaced.
Yeah,
90%. They had to bomb that place into oblivion for that to happen. So the only place these people have to go right now is Rafah. Now Rafah's being hit.
yeah,
And this is, look, it would be asinine to say that it's genocide just based on inference. This is more than inference. This is obvious. Think about what Connor pointed out about the sickness of all this. I mean, it's disgusting. And, you know, I I wish that the Pope and the bishops would come out and condemn it in the strongest of terms. I wish there would be an encyclical or something like that to reinforce Catholic teaching, especially for Catholics that are in the military in the United States or elsewhere, letting them know that, in no uncertain terms, is this a just war at all? And we don't
yeah,
need to wait on some international court to say, oh, yeah, yeah, that's genocide. Oh,
yeah,
oddly enough, uh, the term genocide was coined by uh, a well, and let's say an Israeli man.
yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Uh,
okay.
let's say it like
I
that.
get it. I
Hey,
guess, Connor, I guess one of the things that bothers me is when I'm being told that, okay, I'm falling for the propaganda because
yeah,
I look at the devastation. And now I'm not there. So I'm the kind of person that distrusts everything we've been told throughout history and through the media and everything. I'm really a skeptic at this point. And for me to put judgment on something that I can't really feel and touch and witness myself, it's why I often refrain from this conversation. But the pictures of the devastation of Gaza I mean, it looks worse than World War II, actually. I mean, there's a few buildings left standing after World War II in some of these cities, but it's been leveled. But the other thing that bothers me too is as a Catholic, it's like I've seen the videos of Israeli people spitting on the Orthodox and the Catholics as they
oh yeah,
walk by their church. I mean, are we just supposed to ignore that, Connor?
yeah. I know exactly, Frank. I personally know Orthodox Christians from Jordan, um, that have been in that area, and they throw stones at priests, and nuns. They spit at them. I mean, this happens fairly often. And evangelicals will try and gaslight us and say that this isn't so, but you talk to any Christian from that area, they'll tell you the real story. You can find
Huh.
countless videos, not just a one off.
Yeah.
But Frank, to play devil's advocate for what you said earlier about the church, backing us on this, the evangelicals will then just go, oh well, that's because you have a liberal pope and a liberal hierarchy, and they'll try and play that. Do you agree with me with that?
Well, I mean, oh, geez. But this has been going on for so long. That's the thing about it. It's
Oh,
not
I know.
about hope. This conflict goes back for at least 80 years, and then we have all the set of cannabis stuff that goes back to the 1800s. I mean, the way Israel was created by the British after World War II was an absolute disgrace, to be honest with you. I mean, the Palestinians, listen, and this is why every time Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israelis speak, they say, listen, we're not even going to debate you whether we're legitimate or not. We're here, and that's all that matters. That's the language they use because they understand that there's a history here of how this went down after World War II, because many people were
Um,
questioning it, you know?
Pope
yeah,
Pius Pope
this
Pius X didn't approve of it.
Who's that?
Pope Saint Pius X.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
look,
because
yeah,
there's a case. Sorry, Anthony, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I
There's a
just want,
case to be made. There's a case to be made that that land belongs to Catholics just as much as anybody else, Anthony.
that's true. But I mean, if they want to go back in time, that's
Yeah.
true. But I was just going to say that this has nothing to do, like Connor brings up a good point with the devil's advocate argument, and this has nothing to do with the Pope being politically liberal. This has everything to do with standard church teaching going way back when it comes to just war doctrine.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is not okay, period. This is not a matter of some liberal debate between Republicans and Democrats.
Mhm.
Right. But they ultimately think in that framework. I
Hmm.
it's perennial Catholic teaching, but these Charlie Kirk types and things, they
Yeah.
all they always see everything through that, so they'll always perceive that as liberal or Democrat.
Well, if you look at, well, like the evangelicals do, you look at Israel like it's something of a divine origin, which
Yeah,
we Catholics would disagree with. It's going to be a lot easier, Anthony, to turn a blind eye, right?
Yeah, and I think unfortunately that's what's been going. I don't know. I don't know how much of this is a lack of catechism or not. Maybe Connor could address this from what he's seeing in terms of traditional Catholic communities, but I just wonder how many traditionalists are still on board with this rah, rah, rah America thing where we're supporting Israel no matter what. I mean, I
I've
would,
I have yet to meet one.
Yeah. Okay, well, what I can say is as we move on now is that it's a tragedy what's happening over there. Let's pray for an end to it.
Of course.
Even though some of us may have some disagreements with the Pope and this papacy has been a little bit turbulent, I think you could say, I think it's fair. I think on this one, we all agree that the Pope is probably called this one correct, and
Yeah.
Catholics should follow, at least on this one here. Okay, so now let's move on, and the next topic is, well, it's related to this, and this is going to be a touchy subject, but freedom of the press, right? Our cherished freedom of the press that we have in America. And it's something that, to me, it goes back to our standard political conversations that we have with classical liberals all the time. One of the things they bring up is Italian fascism and how Mussolini shut down freedom of the press, and ultimately how, you know, fascism becomes the great boogeyman in history, even though Marxism has kind of taken over since the end of World War II, thanks to our alliance, the America's alliance with the Marxists. The fascists have been pretty much done away with. But in Italy, the problem that was going on, and Mussolini was a journalist, and this is how I want to set this up, is that when it comes to freedom of the press has never really existed. Freedom of the press is always controlled by behind the scene interest groups. And one of the reasons when Mussolini was asked about when he shut down a few newspapers, why he shut those down, he said, well, wait a minute, I didn't shut down all of them. I shut down a few of them. And the reason is you got to understand is that there's always special interest behind newspapers. In the case of Italy, it was the Soviets and their great allies, the French, that were sending money into many Italian newspapers over there to try and influence and cause an uprising against the fascist regime. And of course, you could understand why the fascist regime was, well, really outraged by this, and they shut those newspapers down. I think it goes back here with our media, Anthony, right? It seems like it's been working against America and the American people for a long time. One lie after another lie, giving us the standard liberal tropes to support the far left party. And yet, when you look down the line, and I don't think this is too much of a conspiracy, um, Zionism, it has a big control over the American media. The six big ones: ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, Fox. They're all Zionists. They're all Zionist controlled. You look to the right wing media; it's not much better. Claremont Institute, Newsmax, Daily Wire, Daily Caller, PragerU, Zionist control. Even Charlie Kirk's own Turning Point USA may not be directly Zionist, but he's getting money from Zionists, right? This is why Charlie upholds this sort of perspective on Israel. I guess my question is, Anthony, freedom of the press in America. We champion it, we celebrate it as one of the great principles of the founding, but have we really ever had it?
um, that's a great question. Um, even going back to the time of the founding fathers, the papers that were around, it got pretty ugly between those guys when they were running for office. Um, So maybe to a degree, we had it in the past. I think when Lincoln comes in, we in the war, what do you want to call it? The Civil War or the War of Northern Aggression? Um, when that war kicks off, Lincoln really comes in heavy-handed. And so you see a lot of rights, kind of temporarily go away. World War II comes around. We've got a lot of heavy propaganda by that point. So, um, but you have to remember, I mean, not just freedom of speech, Frank, but during World War II, not only were Japanese in internment camps here in the United States, but there were also Germans and Italians here in Texas that were put in internment camps. This is not widely spoken about at all. It really kind of destroys the narrative, right? Um, so, you know, we have freedom of speech in terms of being kept in a box, and we've always had that. They've always had control of the narrative for many decades. But at this point, because of the internet, people are not staying in the boxes. Even when they try and recreate the boxes, I believe a lot of the, influencers we see now, it's just the same boxes that used to exist on TV being transferred over to the internet. We saw that with the release of uh, the files, the Epstein files, and how all these influencers were pretty much uh, pro-Israel types, and they just got binders. And where's the information? There's been no arrests, nothing's changed. So I think everybody's starting to see through it. And I think the real question is, and maybe Connor would like to follow up on this too, is what what does it mean when you try to have freedom of speech, yet not only are you censored, but you can lose your job, lose your livelihood, or maybe even worse?
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Um, we do not have free speech in the way people think. Um, and it's ironic that I'm here in Father Charles Coglin's neck of the woods, his old neighborhood, because a lot of this involved him. I mean, these attacks. For instance, you had the Communications Act of 1934, which highly um, censored what could be said on the radio, um, anything that was deemed racial or religious persecution, quote unquote. And that was in part due to Father Coughlin. They couldn't control him, so Congress passed that act.
Hmm.
Um, highly critical of FDR at the time. So, I mean, there's another instance of a president silencing political opposition, and this happened all through these decades. Um, yeah,
He was outspoken against FDR once he actually got into office, right?
yeah. He started off as a big fan of him and the New Deal, but quickly it became evident that FDR he wanted to cozy up to the bankers, and he wasn't going through with a lot of what he had ran on. So
Well, FDR's uncle was involved with the central banks. I can't remember which one, if it was Rockefeller or who, but that's not, I mean, it's just kind of lining up with everything you're saying.
yeah, yeah. The more you study these things, you see how it's all connected. That's why I encourage whoever's viewing this, our viewers, and anyone out there, you really need to study up on history,
Yeah.
American, European history, if you want to understand the ins and outs of all these things we're talking about, because it's a complex picture. There's a lot of things that go into it.
Yeah, for me, the reason why I bring this topic up is exactly what you guys are saying. Whether it's freedom of the press or freedom of speech, it's kind of a joke at this point in America. It's like before we came on the air today, I was advising these fine gentlemen, well, let's watch our language here because the censors are always listening, and we have to censor ourselves, self-censor ourselves here on this platform here, or else the channel will be taken down. And it doesn't get much better when it comes to the right than the left. because the right can be just as politically correct as the left. They just have their own issues. I
Yeah,
think Israel is one of those issues where we're not allowed to really say what we can say there, or else the right uses the same woke tactics as the left.
they do. Yeah,
Yeah, they do. They do. And so, what I say about the right is they're not for free speech. They're for selective speech, right? They're for the speech they want to talk about more than anything else. And they accuse the left of censoring, which the left does. Don't get me wrong. During a certain pandemic era, many of us were shut down on lots of social media platforms, and we had suffered through that. But now, because we have a president that's more open to that, I guess, to a certain degree, everybody's backed off from that because everybody saw how outrageous that was. And
You
so,
know what, Frank?
yeah,
It's what you're saying right now. It's kind of like deja vu because there was a big like mass like just eye-opening, you know,
yes,
with that. And now the same thing is happening in terms of these questions about Zionism, Israel, etc.,
mhm,
right? And
mhm.
some of these big companies, corporations, media, it it's everywhere.
It's
And
everywhere.
honestly, like I think the only reason we have uh censored speech, I think we should thank God that we at least have that. I really do believe it is because of the Second Amendment at this point, because they've tried for decades to really get everything taken away from us, but they haven't been able to accomplish it. A gentleman that runs a podcast, I can't remember his name, he was supposed to be going to the UK and he's talking about some of the similar things we're speaking about here. And he was told that he would likely be arrested when he landed just for his speech.
hey,
Tate, Andrew Tate.
I, I, I have something
No.
maybe controversial, but I wholeheartedly stand by it. The
Mhm.
only censorship I believe in is blasphemy
I
laws.
agree with that. I'm not a purist on free speech.
Oh, neither
No.
am I.
Yeah,
You know,
when it
I don't.
comes, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just gonna say I don't think somebody has the right to blaspheme our Lord and our Holy Mother, and holy things. So that's the only censored speech I believe in, Frank.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, if we're gonna consider pornography speech, I'm against that one as well too. It just depends how we want to rule that one, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually for burning certain types of books and speech.
Yeah. You're a book burner,
So
pal.
yeah, watch out.
Hey, you know what, Frank? You know what it comes down to is Zionism basically is just BLM for evangelical boomers. That's what it is.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Evangelical, but yeah.
And see, it's interesting because all these guys that do cross the line, right? And say things how they believe, true and honest to their beliefs, they've all been kicked off all the social media platforms and have been cast off to Rumble. And
Yeah.
and that's the interesting thing about it is that you have a choice if you're a social media personality, keep it within a certain framework of what's politically correct, or you got to go to Rumble. That's what's happened. That's what's interesting about it all. So, and I guess with that, let's talk about one particular character over on Rumble who's been making lots of news lately, a very young man that a lot of young men are gravitating toward, Nick Fuentes. He continues to make waves, guys. And listen, I started listening to Fuentes a few months back, and I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but the more I listen to him, the more I understand why so many young men are gravitating toward him. And recently, because he's making such waves, his following of the Groypers is absolutely huge at this point. He's getting really big personalities coming out criticizing him, like Megan Kelly and Trent Horn and his wife. Who's the other one that's been criticizing? Lila Rose, who's a Catholic. And it's interesting because they're criticizing him because he's controversial. His race positions are controversial and a few other things. But I think the mistake that many conservatives have made in the past, and I think they're going to make this mistake again, is they're not listening to what people like Fuentes and the Groypers are saying. They're touching at the heart and the soul of how men have been attacked in this society. Listen, they're not finding wives because women have completely been feminized and lost all control. at this point in history. They're not getting married. They're not having families. They can't afford homes. The media tells them that, young, straight white men are the devil, basically, or dumb and stupid. White men have been made a caricature. And again, I'm not one that plays the race card. I'm not. Especially with this black and white divide. I don't consider myself, how do you want to say it? I'm Italian. That's what I am. I'm big on ethnicity, but not necessarily skin color. But I get it in this pluralistic melting pot of America where we've been all thrown into together, where the liberal media has made it about black and white. Young men have become isolated. They feel alone, and they've been backed into a corner, Anthony. Fuentes and the Groypers. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'll keep it brief. I think number one, those that are, let's call it, overly critiquing him, uh, they don't have a clue what's going on in this country. They think it's the 1990s. They are so far off base. They have no idea what's happening in this country right now, especially with the young men. Um, so they need to wake up and smell the coffee, and they need to understand some of the historical things that we're talking about here so they can put the picture together. Because while I think there is a split among the Groypers themselves. Like, they don't all follow Fuentes. I mean, or they maybe did at one point, but even he is not radical enough for them. And yeah, I do appreciate the fact that he has clarified some things because I have critiqued him myself, but not in the way that, but from purely standpoint of Catholic teaching, like, not from more of a Americanist kind of I don't know, feminist perspective. I'm not saying these people are feminists, but like there's this I mean, Connor could probably express it better than myself. It's his generation. Like, how do you guys feel about that, Connor? Like the kind of things you're hearing from these people.
So with Fuentes, it's a mixed bag. I like Frank. I listened to him in the past, and he has some really good stuff at times. Um, he's like a year younger than I am, so we're pretty much the same generation. And our generation, um, it was pretty bad. The propaganda and the brainwashing towards us. I mean, you go through public schools, they teach you, how bad we are, how bad white Americans are, Christians, all the awful things we've done. So you hear this your whole life. On TV, they make them all look dorky and fat and all these things. So you go your whole life, with this narrative, and it. Builds a lot of resentment.
Mhm. I
So
think
I can see where these people are coming from.
mhm.
I hope I did on a good.
I guess here's my thing with Fuentes. A lot of what he says is right.
Yeah.
My issue with race, it's complex, or it's a kind of a 50-50 position, because on one hand he says that concerning the black community, they're behind whites because of genetics. Okay, that's a tough one for me to swallow, because there's plenty of wonderfully beautiful, smart, intelligent, successful black people that we see all around us that I've known my entire life. So to make an argument of genetics is difficult. He says it's not about culture and colonization, it's genetics. Look at Africa, look at places like Haiti, things of that nature. Listen, I don't know what's going on in Africa and in Haiti. I'm pretty sure because they never have proper Western colonization is probably the problem there. I don't know. But like I said, I've known enough black people in my life, special people. They're very smart and intelligent. On the other hand, here's where I will say he's kind of right on this. Go to a major inner city in any, big city in America today. And if you go into the, right neighborhoods, you'll see that there's major dysfunctions in the black community. That can't be denied. And whether it's, culture, whatever it may be, Anthony, there's some rough parts of this country that in certain communities across this country, I don't know if any of these problems are fixable, man.
Well, let me address the genetic issue first. Um, just recently, I don't know if you're familiar with Watson and Crick. They discovered the double helix DNA.
Mhm.
I believe just recently, I think Watson, one of his, I don't know if it was a Nobel Prize or something, something was stripped from him because he actually holds to the idea that um, there is strong genetic differences when it comes to intelligence among races. Um, Now, I'm not saying I believe that, but that is what he believes. So there is possibly some support in science for Fuentes' view and some of these other people. I disagree with it because of other variables that I'm aware of. One of those being nutrition and the sad American diet that we're all on. Uh, there's many studies that show that prisoners, when they're uh, given proper nutrition, and this goes all the way down to juvenile populations, the violence decreases drastically, absolutely drastically. We don't appreciate what kind of psychological problems can develop and what kind of anger issues can develop within a given environment and when nutrition is poor. So we might be the fattest country in the world, but we're not the most nourished country in the world.
True.
Um, Also, I heard Jordan Peterson talk about this, like if you could somehow increase IQ, you could
Mhm.
find a way to do that, that you would just be like, it would be a gold mine that you'd be sitting on top of. Well, uh, as far as I'm aware, red meat and farrin increase IQ. You get enough red meat and you're going to be good to go. So I'm not completely convinced that this is purely a racial thing. There's many stories about um, carnivorous tribes, like some of the Native Americans and even Africans, that were incredibly strong, tall people and also very, very intelligent.
Connor, your thoughts?
So, I mean, my thoughts on this issue, I think that there probably are um, differences in IQ and other physical traits, mental traits on an average. You know, I think that you're going to have exceptions. Obviously, you're going to have people that don't fit the mold, but I do believe that there are differences. I don't think it makes somebody less of a human, or have less dignity, because ultimately we all need the Holy Catholic Church and we all need Jesus Christ, and He died for all of us. Um, but I'm not opposed to the idea of there being differences among us. I think that you can see that in nature.
Yeah, but can we? Hmm. And I guess Fuentes is going to say he's just blatantly honest about that. But in
Right.
America, where we're a melting pot and we're all supposed to get along with a liberal media apparatus, the moment you say something like that, is that a conversation we should be holding, or should we be more tactical about these issues that are very sensitive?
Oh no, I totally agree, Frank. I think the way that Fuentes goes about some of these things, it's bad optics. He's
Mhm.
not cool, and ultimately that's gonna hurt the movement and the cause. Uh, Things that we're hoping to accomplish.
I guess, I grew up, you know, listening to the likes of Thomas Sowell and who's the other gentleman, very smart libertarian black guy, died a few years ago. I
Herman
don't
Cain,
remember. Who's that?
the Herman Cain.
Not Herman Cain. The guy used to sub in for Rush Limbaugh every once in a while. Libertarian
Oh,
guy. I don't remember his name now, I think Candace Owens is very intelligent, and so there's some brilliant black people
She's,
out there.
hey, Candace Owens is quick on her feet, man.
Yeah, she
I
is,
mean,
man.
she'll like take you down like that.
You
And
know,
so,
I love Candace Owens, but I'm gonna say it now. I'm disappointed in her for not releasing that interview with E. Michael
oh,
Jones.
I know. She put it behind the paywall, man.
Yeah.
Oh man,
I think this is more of a scientific discussion, Frank. I think that's the problem. And in science, you're not necessarily going to have, you might have a pet theory that you'd like to see confirmed. That's why I wouldn't take a stance, a hard stance on this one way or another, because I just see too many variables. And so, like, there's geniuses from all different races. And, I'm not sure that we can smooth out IQ on average and with really taking into account all of the different variables when you're doing that.
well, listen, I'll use myself an example. I don't consider myself the smartest guy. I just have a passion and I work hard at what I do. But listen, I'm Sicilian. I come from a long line of peasants, and listen, we're very good people. We practice the faith, we work hard. But Sicily was always an agricultural society, a very agrarian society. My family was in construction and fishing, and my dad never went to school. My mother only had a sixth grade education because, you just didn't, girls just went to school just enough till they got the age to get married. And through that, many Italians or Sicilians, I would say, listen, we weren't the biggest intellect. I'm not saying all Italians. I'm not saying all Sicilians, but we just weren't because the environment didn't call for us to be because of our circumstance and our sort of our geographical location. And so this is why with me, I've kind of seen it with me personally, how hard I've had to work to kind of retrain myself in what I call the curious life. And so, but I don't take that as an act of shame. I'm not as sharp as a Mr. Timothy Gordon. I'm not. I'm not as sharp as a lot of other people. Even though I've studied and learned, I have trouble learning, but I can accept that and still hold myself very, proud of who I am because I have that human dignity. I have the faith. I have God on my side. And so I guess what I'm saying, guys, is that even if one race has a lower IQ, I'm not sure it's genetics. I think environment has been my experience, but there's nothing to be ashamed about. I'm sorry, there isn't.
No, I totally agree, Frank. And frankly, I think that this wouldn't even be an issue if it wasn't for the massive propaganda um, that has been pushing all this resentment, both ways. Um,
Yeah. I think too with Fuentes and the young men that had joined his fight, part of the problem is with the collapse of the culture, the collapse of the family, and the collapse of the faith, young men are not getting married anymore. Part of it is porn has appeased our sexual drive in many ways, or a lot of young men. And the other part of the problem is most young men cannot find women that could ever be good wives, and they're choosing not to get married. And
yeah,
marriage is a very important institution for both men and women. And when men aren't getting married, that's a problem, guys.
yeah. The whole incel movement thing is very strange and uh, not in line with Catholic teaching um, at all. If you're going to be a celibate, you do it for God. You be a priest or a monk or not this incel thing they got going on. It's just bizarre where they hate women and I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Francis says it every 5 minutes how much he hates women. I don't understand either, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Um, every woman in my life has been extremely important to me, starting with my mother and now my wife and now my daughter.
Is
Uh,
he specifying kind of like Americanist type, like liberal women? I don't mean liberal in the sense of Democrat, but I mean
no,
like,
he says in general, he does not specify at all. He just
hmm.
says women in general is what he
I
says.
I hate feminism. All
Yeah.
waves, but
Hmm.
and women were made to be man's helpmate. We're complementary. Yeah, it's just bizarre.
Yeah, and I think this is why a guy like Andrew Tate has risen. And for all of Tate's faults, and he has a lot of them, don't get me wrong, especially when it comes to his resolutions in life. Um,
Sexual.
his, his analysis has inspired lots of young men to be masculine again, because that's masculinity is what's been attacked in our society for the past 60 years.
Yes, Frank, but unfortunately, it, I mean, masculinity has been under attack. They've attacked, everything's toxic masculinity. But the masculinity that people like Andrew Tate are trying to revive it's like a perverse,
I agree.
barbarian, you know,
His
mas-
his solutions are bad, right? He's like, okay, I'm a Muslim, marry five chicks, have 30 kids, buy a castle and five Bugattas. Okay, fine. That's not the end goal. But when I'm talking about his analysis of the
oh yeah,
relationship between men and women, it's pretty right on, I think.
yeah. No, I would agree with you on that.
Yeah. So, and of course, we know he has a dubious history of how he attained his wealth. So he's kind of a fraud. He doesn't see it that way because I think his Islamic religion allows him to have more leeway with that kind of stuff and the multiple wives and things of that nature. But um, but because I think, and let's have an honest conversation here about us Catholics and Christians in general. Have we failed men? Because it seems like these secular forces are rising, right, to stand up for masculinity. Have something happened to Christians and Catholics to where we've lost the ability to communicate a proper and ordered masculinity, Anthony?
Um, yeah, something's happened. I'd say that I'd say that the church has been um, feminized to a degree. It's gone beyond what it was ever meant to. I can't put my finger on exactly what it is, but I know as an altar boy growing up in the church, when you know you see all the wacky liturgical stuff they brought in, a bunch of women dancing up the aisle and crap like that. I mean, that was completely pagan. And I just, in the tight dresses and all that crap, it's like something's gone horribly wrong. And I don't think it's just in the Catholic Church though. I think it's the West in general, Frank. Like, um, you see like women kind of ruling the roost at home. There's words for these types of men now, of course, like that have been created. But even back when I was, 16, 17, I knew guys, and I knew their dads, and I'd see how their wives were controlling them or basically abusing them and verbally and all kinds of stuff. And I would just think to myself, I was making all these mental notes, like never marry a woman like that. And maybe this goes back to feminism.
Yeah.
Maybe Connor would be able to speak to that a little bit more. But I do know some of the women that I've known in the church. I mean, they talk about it in terms of like, oh, we've made so much progress in the church. We're altar girls now. We could do all this. It's like, slow your roll.
Well, what I've noticed,
Wonder why we're not getting priests. They just don't understand what
no,
men want. They have no idea.
no, they don't. And I think what I've noticed, at least in my church, and is that apart from the priest, everybody that works at the church is a woman.
Mm.
And they have the biggest influence at the local parish, right?
Susan Council.
Susan, right? Susan from yeah, from the parish council. That's true. In my church, I'm not gonna lie to you. And so, whenever there's been controversial issues that have come up, the women tend to gravitate toward that emotional liberalism that tends to really haunt the entire parish and ultimately the church, Connor.
Yeah, no, exactly. As somebody that primarily attends a traditional Latin mass parish, I fortunately don't see this too much, but on the off times that I get up late or I'm traveling or something and I wind up at a Novus Ordo, I've seen it before and I can imagine if that was my experience and things, it would be very demoralizing. You can just feel it in the atmosphere, the liberalism and the emotionalism. I don't know. It's kind of hard to put into words, but anybody that has been and experienced that would know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's just tough, guys. It's just we're living in strange times. Men have retreated throughout all of our culture and even within the family. And I think too part of it is that there's no incentive for men to get married anymore because men risk everything. They risk their jobs, their livelihood, their money, their children at the end of the day because the laws, the courts always favor women. I've seen men absolutely decimated by divorce,
Yeah.
and it was the women that left the man. And that's the interesting thing about it is that we think of men as the sexual aggressors because of how God created us with this particular drive. But it's funny because we now live in a society where women are actually more promiscuous now than men are. It's women that are driving up what we call the body counts, and men are retreating because women tend to gravitate toward sort of the alphas, right? And this is part of the breakdown of the culture and why marriages aren't happening anymore. Is you have the bottom, like 80% of women gravitating toward the top 20% of men, which leaves the bottom 80% of men all alone and struggling and fighting for the few decent women that are left that don't look at the world just by the sort of this hypergamous sort of view of the world to get the best, the strongest alpha male. It's a problem. It's I walked into a GameStop a few months back, and it was interesting because I walked in, the first thing I noticed was all girls working at GameStop. Like, really? Girls working at GameStop? I mean, one here, there, but they were all girls. And listen, they were all kind of butch, to be honest with you. Short hair, not very feminine, things of that nature. And we're living a strange time where the pretty girls are hypergamous, where they're going after the top males, but the average girls that could serve a good purpose for average men, to be honest with you, are purposely making themselves look ugly. What's going on, guys? Strange world.
I defer to Connor.
Clown world.
Clown world, right? It's just something I noticed. There's nothing wrong with a good average woman, and a good average man hooking up. We don't have to be tens for crying out loud, you know?
Oh,
Problem with our modern society, Frank.
Huh?
If you back in the olden days, most people, like the Sicilians and others lived in villages
Mhm.
or usually just the right number of girls for the guys, and now they have to compete with the whole world.
Yeah,
You know, they're
yeah,
seeing ends everywhere, so yeah, it's just a mess.
yeah,
oh my gosh.
yeah. I know, I know.
Hilarious.
I've heard stories of listen, because of the internet, Instagram and all that stuff, these wealthy men, they see a girl across the country, hey, yeah, I'll fly you out here for a night kind of a thing, right?
Oh my
And,
gosh.
and see, but what that does is it takes away women from the local pool, like Connor is talking about here. It used to be a situation where men had women to choose from in their own community. Now the global economy, I guess you want to call it that, has just distorted the relationships.
Yeah, you used to have to marry your cousin.
Yeah, there you go, right?
Captain, man,
Oh my goodness.
I
Oh,
know, I know.
I'm just joking, kind of. But I mean, look, I don't understand this whole mentality. I think the solutions are wrong. Like flying somebody out. Like I
right?
don't. You know what I don't understand?
Some
Maybe it's just me. But
Mhm.
like, is nobody like worried about disease anymore? Does nobody worry about that kind of thing?
they
I
don't.
mean, it's disgusting, man. Like
I know. It really
I
is.
just I don't get it. I really don't. And like I've told my son, my oldest son, because he's approaching the age now where he's going to be looking for a real job, making real money. And I told him, I was like, look, you know, you're going to marry a Catholic woman, but even still, you know, prenup, we're doing a prenup because the courts don't care that you're
Yep.
Catholic. They don't care that she's Catholic. They don't care. If that woman loses her mind, she's got your kids and your money and
Everything,
everything.
everything.
Everything. Yeah.
Okay, so which leads to the next question here. Catholics marrying non-Catholics.
Oh boy,
What's the failure rate on that, guys?
Frank, are you episode canceled?
What's that?
Are you trying to get this episode canceled? Controversial topic after controversial topic.
Hey, man, that's the way
Okay,
we do
let's
it,
do it.
man.
Let's roll. Let's roll.
So, well, I guess, listen, I'll start on this one real quick here. I've just seen mixed marriages fail at a high rate. When Catholics marry non-Catholics, particularly Protestants, they fail at a very high rate. And I think that's something that we older men here need to advise the younger men on is just be careful with that. Passion and infatuation. I get that exists, especially in a pluralistic culture at a time where the faith is collapsing. But the faith has to be first and foremost. Let that form your relationships more than anything else. And it just I've seen it too often where these mixed marriages they just fail, and then the men are left holding the bag, I guess you could say. Guys?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've seen probably roughly an 85% failure rate of that in my own two extended families. That does not work.
Yeah.
yeah, Frank. This is kind of personal to me because my first wife was a Protestant. She's a
Okay.
she's a Catholic now. It's my current wife, but stolen from me.
All right.
You might made that joke, but no, I from experience, in my own family, and I have a good buddy of mine who's the same age as me, same grade, and he has a Protestant wife, and it just seems like such a difficult situation. I can't imagine. They have to rotate churches, Protestant church and then the Catholic church, and I personally couldn't do it. I'm thankful that my wife's Catholic and we don't have to worry about that problem. But for my own kids, I probably would. I no, I definitely would not want that. I'd want them to marry within the faith. It just causes
It does.
too
And
many problems, and a house divided against itself can't stand.
right. And the primary, people that suffer are the kids. And I've seen this. What happens is there's a giant debate of how to approach faith in the home. The first of which is baptism gets delayed. And when baptism gets delayed, communion gets delayed. And when communion gets delayed, confirmation gets delayed. And oftentimes, these kids don't even get the sacraments anymore. They may get baptized, but they don't get first communion. They don't get, confirmation. They're not going to the Holy Eucharist anymore. And it's a weird situation. Kids are being baptized later and later because of this procrastination between mixed marriages. It's a travesty everywhere around. Listen, when my where my the island of Favignana off the coast of Sicily, where my mother was born, right? Like the family church there, as I call it, on this small little island. In her days, my mom said, if you waited longer than 1 month to baptize your baby, that the church would actually turn down the lights, dim the lights in darkness as an act of shame because the parents waited for more than a month to get the baby baptized,
That's
right?
what that's what our society lacks that it needs is shame.
Yes. Yeah. You know, it doesn't have shame anymore because we're pluralistic and we have freedom and everybody can believe whatever they want. And the standards have all broken down because of this Protestant conformity, Anthony.
Freedom, liberty.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I don't really know what else to say about it. I guess I could add, and maybe Connor could confirm this for me, but I'm pretty sure that standard church teaching, and it hasn't changed, is that you should have the child baptized within 2 weeks. Now, there might be caveats and exceptions to
Yeah.
that. Um, I know that we only have one priest at our parish, and so he's really bogged down. So we had to wait a little bit longer, but we got it done within a month. Um, and there's a shortage of priests now. Let's be honest. That's a problem too. Now, Connor, I think you go to the FSSP. I go to the Ordinate now, which was the Anglican
Yes.
rite that was kind of brought in. But um, What are things like on your end with that?
I mean, it's pretty quick. I think typically all mine have been baptized within like 3 weeks. I think the
Yeah.
fast was like 8 days was the soonest we had one baptized, but it's usually pretty quick. You want to get them baptized as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I go Noah's Ordo, so apparently I'm going to hell according to most trads. So what do I know, right? I ain't got I ain't got a traditional Latin parish anywhere near me. So I guess I don't know. We'll find out. I guess at some point. All right,
Uh,
all right, guys. Well, it's been a great conversation. Interesting. Some little twists and turns here. Anthony, any final thoughts, my friend?
Um, yeah. I would like to add that there have been, I would call it a handful when you look at the entire church, a handful of bishops and cardinals that have condemned Israel, although they have not said formally that this is genocide. And I asked the question, what is not just and I don't just mean the church, but I mean every institution in society throughout the world, not one has formally condemned it as genocide, not even the UN. They've issued no formal declaration. They've issued, in any case, they've had people study it. They're like, yeah, looks like it is, but it hasn't been formally condemned as such. What is the fear? What is the holdup? If any other nation were doing this, would we have already gotten this condemnation?
Connor, buddy, your last thoughts.
yeah, I think as faithful Catholics, we need to be firm in our understanding of just war, um, and condemning immoral abrogations of that. What's going on with Israel and Gaza? It clearly is a genocide. We should be steadfast in condemning it, and I'm happy that the Holy Father has said something about that finally. It's good to hear, and I hope that other clerics, will follow suit. Um, I think that we talked about some really good stuff today with Charles Coughlin. I'd like to do more of a deep dive on him with you sometime. Um, I think he's going to be vindicated someday with a lot of the things that he was talking about, almost 100 years ago now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we could do that. We go deep on Father Coughlin sometime, and yeah, I agree with you. It's a tough time right now. What's going on in Israel? It's a tragedy playing out before our very eyes, and it looks like Israel has gone all in to just take over more territory, and at whatever cost at this point in time. Um, I guess my appeal is to the Protestants not to fall prey to this set of this not set of cannabis, but this dispensationalism that was called, I'm forgetting the name, the theology that the Protestants concocted in the 19th century here to justify whatever this is.
Schofield Bible, Frank. A lot of
Schofield,
Schofield
yeah,
Bible.
yeah, exactly. Schofield Bible, the errors in that, and there was some interesting stories about the funding about that there at the end of the day. But yeah, I know, I know. And so for me, it's again, it comes down to this idea of American religious liberty. I know Timothy Gordon has told us, well, that's perfectly Catholic because everybody gets to follow their own conscience. But I'm just not sure about American religious liberty because the way it's played out has been anarchy. And part of this dispensationalism, this heretical theology, has been because Protestant pastors have taken this religious liberty and they've run with it, and they've beaten out all the old line Protestant churches, and they've created these new Pentecostal slash evangelical churches that have embraced this false heresy. And under the guise of religious liberty, nobody can even question this at this point in time. This is what happens when you create a nation that wasn't Catholic at its origins. It was a bunch of Protestant sects fighting it out at the end of the day. And now we've come full circle here where, the heresies of Protestantism, they've done a lot of damage historically all over the world, starting at the Reformation, going through the first two world wars, and being really sort of the gatekeepers of the liberal world order. At some point, we have to start talking about this and point this out. The Anglo-Protestant world has done a lot of damage. I know they like to take a lot of credit for high society, at least creating high society, but they've also done a lot of damage as well too, with many of the great liberal revolutions that have brought the West to its knees and really to its end. My friends, I want to thank my good friend Anthony Connor for joining me tonight. Another roundtable of edition of Frankly Speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining me. Signing off. Good night, everybody.